I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I thought I might be, for that's clear anybody to see. I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as think as I smart I am. I'm not as...
Welcome to brainsmatter. This is episode 13 for the 16th of January 2007. I'm the Ordinary Guy, and I'll bring you stories on science, curiosities, knowledge, and anything else that's interesting. On today's show, we hear about temperature scales, a brain teaser, the origins of chess, the pin of the week, and I'll bring you some of the latest news in the world of knowledge. Today was a sweltering 41 degrees in Melbourne. This summer has been one of the warmest in recent memories, so much so that half the state had power blackouts today, probably from people running their fans and air conditioners to the ground. Trains, trams, office buildings and houses didn't have electricity for up to 3 or so hours, not the best thing when it's a 41 degree day. Most people, on hearing me say 41 degrees, would think, wow, now that's hot. But for some, those countries that use the old British imperial system, and that's of Fahrenheit, miles, feet and pounds, it probably makes less sense. The odd thing is not even the British use the old British imperial system. 41 degrees Celsius translates to around 106 Fahrenheit. So where did Fahrenheit come from? It was named after a German scientist who was born in 1686. A guy named Gabriel Fahrenheit. He created a mercury thermometer for calculating temperatures. He decided to make the lowest temperature he could muster using ice and salt, equivalent to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which we now know to be 32 degrees below zero in the normal scale. Fahrenheit then decided to make the highest temperature on his scale equivalent to the temperature of the human body, which he believed to be 96 Fahrenheit. We know this today as actually being 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The Celsius or centigrade system was first proposed in the 18th century by a Swedish scientist named Anders Celsius. He took the freezing point of water as 0 degrees and the boiling point of water as 100 degrees and divided the scale equally between these two markers. This is what the majority of the world uses today. And just remember, in this podcast, if I don't mention units, you can assume I'm talking in terms of metric. Expect no less. And now it's time for today's brain teaser. What's the most common symbol on the flags of the world? Have you ever played chess? You've probably played different versions of it, and I'm not talking about the sorts of chess games on the computer. You can get all sorts of chess pieces now, from Simpsons chess to the Pirates of the Caribbean chess to Lord of the Rings chess. Where did chess come from? The game began in ancient India, where it was called Chaturanga. The name refers to the 4 members of the Indian army: the soldier, the elephant, the chariot, and the horse. In the 6th century, the game travelled to Persia, where they call the game Shatranj. From there, it spread to the Arab world, and eventually to Europe around the 10th century. The name chess comes from Persian, probably from Shah, which means king, or Shatranj itself, and checkmate comes from the term Shatmat, which in Persian means the king is dead.
okay. Very superstitious, writing on the wall. Very superstitious. Hey, ladder's about to fall. Oh, a 13-month-old baby. Ooh,
Now it's time for the answer to the brain teaser. The most common symbol on the flags of the world is the star. Over 50 countries have stars on their flags. The second most popular symbol on a flag is the crescent.
you believe in things you don't understand, then you suffer. Superstition ain't the way. It ain't the way. Oh, no, no, no. Very superstitious.
Now it's time for the pin of the week. Today's pin of the week goes to Justine from Adelaide in South Australia. Thanks for adding to the Frapper map, and I hope you're enjoying the show. If you want to be part of Pin of the Week, it's easy. Just put a pin into the Frapper map with your name and location, which is listed on the website, and you automatically become eligible.
You don't want to save me. Well, sad is my song. My song. When you believe in things you don't understand, but then you suffer.
So what's been happening in the world of knowledge lately? Well, scientists from the University of Washington in Seattle have developed a robot that's controlled not by normal remote control, but brainwaves. Rajesh Rao, the research leader, said, "We're using a well-known, well-characterized response that occurs in the brain to control a physical device in the world. The response he's talking about is the same that's triggered in your brain when you lose something and then find it. This response is something scientists called the P300 response. The 300 refers to the 300 milliseconds it takes on average for your neurons to produce the reaction. Given that the P300 response is strong, this is what Rao and his team pick up on via sensors to enable the person with the electrode cap to control the robot. The person has to initially be calibrated to the device, as each person is slightly different from each other. Once the computer is set to that individual, they're then able to run a few basic instructions via their brainwaves to the robot.
When you believe in things you don't understand, but then you suffer. It ain't the way, oh, it ain't the way, baby.
According to the conservation group WWF, over 50 new species of plants and animals have been found over the past year or so in the forests of Borneo. This includes catfish with protruding teeth, 30 new fish species, 2 tree frog species, 16 ginger species, and 3 tree species. All of these have been found in an area known as the Heart of Borneo, which is an 85,000 square mile highland area covered with rainforest in the centre of the island. Unfortunately, this habitat is being threatened by the clearing of the forest for rubber, palm oil, and paper pulp industries. Today, only about half of Borneo's original cover remains, according to the WWF. Sweden wants to remove any dependence on fossil fuels for the country within 15 years, and this is without building any further nuclear reactors. The country is planning to become an oil-free economy, according to a committee of industrialists, academics, farmers, car makers, civil servants, and a few others, who will end up reporting to the Parliament in a few weeks' time. The government intends to replace all fossil fuels with renewable energy sources because of the dangers of climate change. Our dependency should be broken by 2020, Mona Sahlin, Minister for Sustainable Development, has said. There shall always be better alternatives to oil. which means no house should need oil for heating and no driver need to turn solely to petrol. There's a theory called the peak oil theory that states that at some point we'd have hit the peak oil production, and from that point onwards it's all downhill. The amount of oil being produced will gradually decline and continue to do so. That would result obviously in oil prices increasing continually, and many claim that peak oil production will happen, or has already happened, from sometime between now and the year 2020 to 2030. Many other countries are making this move as well, although not quite as aggressively as Sweden has stated. Iceland wants to power all of its boats and cars with hydrogen by 2050. Brazil wants to convert their motor vehicles to run on ethanol within about 5 years, and the British government wants to generate around 10% of their electricity from renewable sources by 2012. Unfortunately, Australia and the US are behind in that sense. You may have heard of the new comet in the sky that can be seen in the west as it approaches the Sun. It's called Comet Mcnaught, named after an Australian, Rob Mcnaught, an advanced amateur astronomer. It's the brightest comet visible since 1965, and he discovered it about a year ago. It'll be hidden soon as it goes behind the Sun, but should reappear later in January. Some say that it may even be visible during daylight, as long as you can block out the Sun in your field of view. Bigger brains mean that you're more likely to survive, especially if you have feathers, it appears. A study was published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B, Biological Sciences, showed that birds with larger brains, such as parrots and crows, survive better against environmental challenges than their smaller brain cousins. Dr. Daniel Sol from the Centre for Ecological Research in Barcelona, Spain, said that if you have a big brain, you're more capable of adjusting behaviour and responding to environmental changes. This can help you to survive. Studies of primates, which include humans, find similar results, which could also explain why Homo sapiens survived to today and some other earlier types of man didn't. Thank you once again for listening to the BrainsMatter podcast for the 16th of January 2006. If you have any comments, questions or suggestions, please keep that email rolling in at mail@brainsmatter.com or leave a comment on the episode's show notes at www.brainsmatter.com, and make sure you let me know where you're from and how you found the podcast. Music on today's show comes courtesy of Podsafe Audio, and you can find the podcast by doing a search within iTunes or by subscribing manually via the website. Please leave comments and vote for the podcast in Podcast Alley. If you already voted last month, be sure to vote this month as well. And for those who use dig.com, you can also dig the podcast in the new podcast section. Either click on dig on the BrainsMatter website or go to dig.com, then click on podcast once you've logged in, do a search for BrainsMatter and then click on dig. Apparently you can dig individual episodes to your heart's content for the ones you like the most, but the site's a bit flaky, so it's actually not working too well. I've contacted them and they say that they're trying to work out the bugs, but apparently it's a very popular site, so the more you dig, the more people are likely to come across the podcast, and hopefully that'll lead to more donations which will allow me to do bigger and better things with the show. I'll leave you with a quote from George Christoph Lichtenberg. Everyone is a genius at least once a year. The real geniuses simply have their bright ideas closer together. I hope you enjoyed the show. Bye for now.
I'm not as think as I smart, I am. I'm not as think as I smart, I am. I'm not as think as I thought I might be, for that's clear anybody to see. I'm not as think as I smart, I am. I'm not as think as I smart, I am. I'm not as think as I clever I would be, I'm not half as clever as me.